Good evening from Washington. I'm Larry O'Connor. Of course, Elon Musk's purchase of the social media platform formerly known as Twitter has brought on quite a few revelations about how that operation used to work hand in hand with the government to censor people, censor entities. The New York Post, the Hunter Biden laptop story, how the FBI was involved in that. It was a little stunning to learn, actually to have our suspicions affirmed is more accurate. But now we're learning about how non-government organizations are also getting into the game. Our friends over at Libs of TikTok, which of course is run by Chaya Raichek, she put out on Twitter that she has been bullied by none other than the Anti-Defamation League. Let's take a look at what she put out there. And to be more accurate, X, as it's now called, has been bullied by the ADL to censor her account and to push to remove her from the platform. Elon Musk actually affirmed all of this with his own tweet too, saying that his organization and other social media organizations, let's take a look at that tweet if we could, or X, who have pushed advertisers, thanks to the encouragement of groups like the Anti-Defamation League, to try to silence or at least pull ad revenue from their platforms if they allow users like Chaya Raichek, Libs of TikTok, to continue. Now, here's the important thing. The ADL, the Anti-Defamation League, was founded to combat anti-Semitism. Chaya Raichek is actually an Orthodox Jew, and she doesn't tweet anything or post anything that has to do with religion, and certainly not the Jewish religion. We went to the ADL's website, and their mission statement is pretty clear: to stop the defamation of the Jewish people and to secure justice and fair treatment to all. So what's going on here? Why is the ADL so interested in things that are political and not seemingly associated with the defamation of the Jewish people? Let's bring on David Harsanyi. He's the senior editor of The Federalist. And David, I remember the ADL. Abe Foxman, he was their legendary director, I think all through the late 80s into the 90s and the 2000s. And he had a pretty clear mission, and that was to push back against the defamation of Jewish people because, well, we saw how devastating and horrific and evil that can be coming out of World War II. So what's going on here?
Well, I would say about a decade ago, the new president, I think he was called then, maybe now he's CEO, his name is Jonathan Greenblatt, I think, was an Obama appointee, and he was named, he was charged with leading the ADL, which since then, and even before then, frankly, to some extent, has just become a partisan left-wing organization that constantly exaggerates the threat of right-wing anti-Semitism, which of course exists, and diminishes or ignores the threat of institutionalized left-wing anti-Semitism, meaning in progressive activist groups, in the government of the United States, in Congress, things like that. So it obviously will not like Elon Musk for, if he has or not, I'm not sure, but it opened up Twitter to more free speech. With that, you're of course going to get some ugly voices as well, and that's the price to pay for free expression. So it would not surprise me if they had ginned up some kind of boycott against X or Twitter.
Right.
Though the number, the 22 billion, seems like a pretty high number to me, but I'm no expert on advertising revenue.
And listen, it would be one thing if Mr. Greenblatt and the ADL were encouraging Elon Musk and the leadership at X.com to silence neo-Nazi voices or anti-Semitic voices specifically. But Libs of TikTok, I mean, if anything, they push back on transgender issues, right? And people who are trying to encourage children to have puberty blockers, that sort of. Unless I'm missing something from the account. I've met Chaya Raichek. She is an Orthodox observant Jew. We had to accommodate her schedule when we interviewed her because of that. So why is the ADL going after her? That has nothing to do with the Jewish people.
Because they're not, I said this on Twitter and people were a little upset, but I don't really think they're a Jewish organization. They're a progressive activist group that masquerades as a Jewish organization or happens to have Jewish people running it, but pushes things like critical race theory and, sort of far left identitarian views of the world. I don't think there's anything intrinsically or theocratically or anything, theologically, Jewish about that, right?
Yeah.
So,
well, if anything, if you look at Orthodox Jews and their faith and their religion based on the Old Testament, they probably agree with what Libs of TikTok is saying about the LGBTQ agenda.
Yeah, I don't want to get in trouble, but, I think that you have Reform Judaism and even farther left from there, which have basically appropriated leftist socialist ideas and then presented them as faith, which I think is very problematic for Jewish people generally in the United States and elsewhere. But yeah, I mean, obviously they want to go after people who they find politically unsavory, right?
Right.
So, and that's the problem. Who defines what hate speech is? That's always been the problem with trying to limit discourse. And obviously this is just another example of that.
And so this guy, Jonathan Greenblatt, because he was an Obama administration official, he worked in the Obama White House, and he transitioned right from that job, which is obviously, by definition, a highly partisan political position, and he went right to the ADL, which, of course, that means, by definition, the ADL is now led by a highly partisan political person.
Listen, everyone's got a worldview, so you're never going to get a perfectly apolitical person to run an organization like this, but they have no right to say that they speak for the Jewish people. I mean, they don't speak for me, and I don't speak for other Jews, right? So that is a problem. But like I said, their cynical use of their history and of Judaism and the real. There is anti-Semitism. I think it's somewhat exaggerated, and people think there's more of it than there is, or any kind of systemic or real dangerous anti-Semitism. But it happens. There's violence. There are terrible people on the right and on the left, and but they only seem to focus on one. So that's fine. Say we're a left-wing group that focuses on right-wing anti-Semitism, and then there you have it. The ADL, then it would work better. But that's not what it says it is.
They could be the LADL, the liberal anti, right? Because here's what my concern is. I abhor anti-Semitism. I think that there is a very important role in our society for a group like the Anti-Defamation League. But if they are so politically aligned and affiliated in this way, where they go well beyond just what the ADL originally was focused on, and they become a political activity group, then it sort of diminishes the importance of the original message. In other words, fighting back and combating anti-Semitism is now seen as a political position instead of a human position.
Yeah, but the problem is I don't really know what they accomplish at all, actually, anymore. I mean, I don't know how they're fighting anti-Semitism, really. I mean, I guess in some sense, they would be calling it out. But the problem is they like gin up these fake studies where they, how can I say it? They're part of the grievance industry in some sense. They need the anti-Semitism to exist too. I know this sounds terrible, but they need it to exist, and they need it to seem like it's growing and more dangerous, or they don't exist, and their charge is no longer valid, right?
Yeah.
And it's not, but so there's a lot of dishonesty there.
It's interesting. Yeah. One could argue that if the ADL's mandate now is to fight back against criticism of the transgender activism, then maybe anti-Semitism isn't so bad anymore, because they have to find new fights to pick. And that's, again, not a safe place, I think, for the ADL to be. It's like they're working hand in glove with the Southern Poverty Law Center.
Yeah, I mean, they want people to read critical race theory. On their site, they have critical race theory readings for people to educate themselves. A lot of those authors say that there's an oppressee relationship, and Jews are on the wrong side of that. So how could that same organization tell you to read that book and then say that they're fighting against the defamation? I mean, that's the biggest trope there is, right? Anti-Semitic trope that exists in the West. So how can they tell people to read that and then say they're fighting against the defamation of the Jewish people? It doesn't make sense.
Indeed. All right. Well, hopefully neither of us got in trouble here, David Harsanyi. Thanks for joining us. That said, you're used to being in trouble. It's all right. You're right at the Federalist. Thanks for joining us tonight. There's more to come. It's O'Connor Tonight on Salem News Show. We just had a jobs report Friday, just in time for Labor Day weekend. And if you notice something about these reports, Republicans will go on TV and say these jobs numbers are terrible, horrible, the economy's in the tank. And then Joe Biden goes out and gives a speech saying we got the strongest economy in the world. This is the best jobs report ever. Why isn't there just objective reality about these things? And there was another curious thing about this jobs report. Well, I'll ask our guest, Brandon Arnold. He's the Executive Vice President of the National Taxpayers Union. And did you notice, Mr. Arnold, that once again, previous month's jobs numbers were adjusted down? Like for 3-4 months in a row, they give us this number, what the jobs numbers are, and I said, oh, well, it's not great, but it's better than, and then you find out a month later, oh, we were wrong about that. Why does that keep happening? And why does it keep happening in one direction?
Yeah, well, I think, first of all, the economy is a little bit weaker than Joe Biden would have you believe. But second, I think this is a lesson in ways that you should manage expectations. You shouldn't spike the football every time a favorable report comes out because they are subject to revisions. More data comes in, they refine these numbers, they change them. This happens across the board with government reports. We see that with GDP reports when they come out. So, yeah, you need to be a little bit more cautious and guarded when you're celebrating these victories, which aren't really huge victories, as you allude to here. Unemployment is up, jobs are still being created, but it is a very weird economy, as you kind of said there. It's a weird economy and one which I think could take a turn for the worse in the not too distant future.
Well, and this idea that jobs have been created, isn't it true that the vast majority of jobs that were created during this presidency were really jobs that had existed until the government literally made it illegal to go to work during the pandemic? All we did to create these jobs was to no longer make it illegal to get in the car and go work at your office.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And that's one of the areas that's really frustrating to hear him go out there and talk about how he's a job creating president. Yeah, we killed jobs. We literally killed jobs by preventing businesses from opening their doors. Of course, they're not going to have employees. Once we allowed them to reopen their doors, they hired again. They brought people back. They created jobs. So it's a complete canard. It's really ridiculous for the president to even say it. It's the same story when he talks about deficit reduction. He reduced the deficit. All he did was allow government programs that were built to get us through the pandemic to expire. And when they expired, we stopped spending quite as much money. Now, since then, he has passed a number of massive bills that have increased spending and driven up deficits dramatically. So he's not really out there singing that tune quite so much anymore.
The president also continues to say, and I heard him say it at his Labor Day speech there in front of a lot of organized labor members who were voluntold to show up for his speech, that he didn't raise taxes on anyone earning less than $400,000. He says it all the time. You're the vice president of the National Taxpayers Union. Is that true?
No, I don't think so. Listen, we get really clever in Washington. We try to, choose our words in a very misleading fashion. And I think that's what he's doing here. We've seen a massive tax increases under this president. He's raised taxes on corporations. He's increased tariffs, both tariffs that manufacturers are primarily paying, as well as U.S. consumers. And when you raise those taxes, whether you want to call them an income tax directly or you want to call them indirect taxes or taxes that have second order effects, the net effect is the same. People are paying more to the federal government than they used to. Mm-hmm. And that is really problematic anytime as a proponent of low taxes, but particularly at this time when we have rampant inflation. Inflation has come down, but remember, it's cumulative. So we still have prices that are much higher than they were pre-pandemic. So when you're dealing with this really tough inflation situation, you're raising prices directly or indirectly in the form of higher tariffs and higher taxes. That's a recipe for really problematic policy. It's a recipe for a lot of struggling families and small businesses.
So in other words, yeah, I mean, I just want to play this out so everybody understands. He raises tariffs or he raises taxes on corporations. Of course, corporations don't pay taxes. They pass it on in the cost of their goods or services. So let's say you go to buy a car. And because of tariffs and because of corporate taxes, that car now costs $3,000 more than it did before the Biden administration raised those taxes and tariffs. Are you allowed to say, wait a minute, I don't make $400,000, so can I get the old price of this car?
Yeah, unfortunately, that's not the case. And indeed, a lot of these taxes hit lower income Americans much harder because they can't afford that additional burden. That extra $1,000 or $3,000 hits that middle income taxpayer, that lower income taxpayer, way harder than somebody that's making well into the six figures. They can absorb that additional shock. So yeah, when we raise the price of steel, aluminum, tin, all of those things result in higher prices of fruits, vegetables, automobiles, you name it, that fall on the middle class. Yeah. Oftentimes. They're the ones that usually take it on the chin, unfortunately.
And of course, energy costs affect literally every good and service. And I've got to think gasoline prices are going to affect lower income people more because they're in more labor intensive and service related jobs. They can't say, yeah, you know what, I'll just zoom into work 2 days a week and save myself the gas money. No, they're blue collar workers. They got to be there.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And they're not buying the Teslas and fancy EVs that Biden wants us to all purchase. these are blue collar Americans, roll up their sleeves, get to work types of people that often are driving older cars. If you don't have as much money, oftentimes you're driving that older car. It may not consume gasoline quite as efficiently, so that can hit you even more acutely than it would hit somebody in a brand new EV or hybrid or what have you. So we need to be a little bit more mindful as we craft policy of who these policies actually impact. And again, it's usually the lower income Americans and the middle class Americans that struggle the most when prices increase and when taxes increase, even if, as Biden says, we're not increasing taxes directly on them, we're not raising their income taxes. They're still paying a higher price when they purchase just about everything.
Well, as you know, here in Washington, D.C., we're not allowed to have any kind of conversation, whether it's at a pub or at a ball game, or certainly about policies like this, Mr. Arnold, without shooting it through the prism of next year's presidential election. So given that, and given the mixed economic messages that the American people are hearing, what's going to be the overriding theme, do you think, going into the presidential election? What the president is saying, what people in the media are spinning, or what the actual taxpayer is feeling, what the voter is feeling, because they know everything costs a lot more than it used to.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring that up because I was actually just sifting through some poll data, and it says that Americans are really focused on economic issues more than they normally would be. So the kitchen table issues right now are primarily things like inflation. Biden passed this massive Inflation Reduction Act. It was the worst named legislation in our nation's history. He's even gone back and said, I wish I didn't call it that because it's not actually reducing inflation. But that's what Americans are concerned about. And more than ever, I think they're concerned about how much this government is spending. We're looking down the barrel of $2 trillion deficits in the very near future here. Congress has completely mismanaged. The president has completely mismanaged the nation's finances. And Americans are paying the price for that. They're paying the price in terms of higher inflation, and they're paying the price in terms of passing down this debt to our future generations, to our children and grandchildren, who will have to pay higher taxes. And I think we are having kind of a reckoning period right now where we're realizing these are not sustainable economic policies. We need a president who will change the narrative in Washington and begin to act in a more fiscally responsible way. And hopefully that will manifest itself in Republican debates as well as what Biden is saying out on the side.
We did see it in the first Republican debate. I'd expect to see it again. However, Mr. Arnold, are Republicans vulnerable on this, and specifically President Trump, considering the spending that was done, whether it was appropriate or not because of the pandemic, but the spending went through the roof in that final year of President Trump's administration?
You're absolutely right. And even prior to the pandemic, we had a debt ceiling crisis before the pandemic. And the solution that Republicans, including President Trump, supported was raising spending by a few $100 billion in exchange for lifting that debt ceiling. A very different conversation that we had a few months ago when we actually cut spending modestly, but we moved in the right direction, at least during the passage of the Fiscal Responsibility Act, which raised the debt ceiling. So yeah, I think Republicans are exposed on this, and Republicans have a mediocre record at best. Democrats have a horrible record, but there haven't really been great instances of leadership from either party when it comes to managing our nation's finances. That needs to change because, again, Americans are watching this issue, and I think they're doing so much more closely than they have historically.
I think you're right. I think, though, their instinct is that sort of a pox on both your houses sort of feeling. That said, comparing administrations, how much did it cost to fill your car up with gas during Trump, and how much does it cost now? That's a pretty tangible message, and I think that all Americans are feeling it. We got to leave it there. Thanks for an insightful conversation, Mr. Arnold. Brandon Arnold, National Taxpayers Union. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
There's more to come. I want you to keep it right here. Don't go anywhere. It's O'Connor Tonight on Salem News Channel. There's a video of a 29-year-old woman who was talking to her camera phone on TikTok that's gone viral right now. And frankly, we're excited anytime a viral video from TikTok involves a woman who was actually born without male genitalia. So that's already some progress. But what she had to say in her video apparently is part of the controversy. Here, take a look.
It's 10:45 a.m. on a Saturday. I am 29 and single, and I don't have kids yet. Here's what your Saturday morning looks like when you're single at 29 and you don't have a kid running around the house. I didn't rise from my bed until 10:15. Every time I thought, I should probably get up and do something. I thought, why? Nobody's making me. I'm not missing out on anything. I went to Beyonce last night, and I didn't get home until 1 a.m. And I danced and drank my little heart out, and I didn't pay a babysitter to watch my kids as I did that. And I woke up a tad hungover this morning, which is probably why I was in bed for so long. And I was just scrolling on my phone, and I saw a picture of shakshuka, and I thought, you know what sounds really good? Maybe I'm gonna learn how to make shakshuka today. Because I have no plans, and I don't have kids, and I don't have a husband, and I don't have errands to run. I can go to the grocery store and learn how to make shakshuka. So that's on my agenda today. Also on my agenda, probably a rewatch of some Real Housewives of New York. I'm also doing a rewatch of Normal People on Hulu, which is really spicy and I highly recommend. Weirdly, I'm into this documentary on Netflix about blue zone countries. So I've got a pretty stacked day. Anyway, I say all this to say, whenever I'm hard on myself about why I'm not married and I don't have kids and I should be further along at 29, almost 30, I wouldn't want to do anything else this Saturday. And I know that you can do all these things when you have kids and you're married, and I understand, but the effortlessness and ease of my life, just kind of focusing on myself and the shakshuka I want to make or the Beyonce concert I want to go to, really pays off when I'm hard on myself for not being where society tells me I should be in life.
Wow. If I were only a single man. I mean, she seems like quite the catch, right? I mean, she's a heavy drinker. She watches Real Housewives, and she can make shakshuka. Now, normally this video probably wouldn't go viral just by itself. I think this is the reason why it went viral. Our friend Matt Walsh over at Daily Wire, he retweeted it on X, or re-X'd it on Tweet, or whatever they're doing these days. And his commentary was, her life doesn't revolve around her family and kids, so instead it revolves around TV shows and pop stars. Worst of all, she's too stupid to realize how depressing this is. Well, is it depressing? Is she stupid? Or is there maybe a larger and, dare I say, more nuanced conversation to have about this? Let's bring in Julie Gunlock. She's the co-host of O'Connor and Company on WMAL Radio in Washington, D.C. I'm the O'Connor part of that. And she's also with Independent Women's Forum. So, Julie, first of all, do you know how to make shakshuka?
Yes, it's not that hard.
Okay.
It's like an easy thing to make. And I was kind of laughing at her like, oh, I'm going to learn to make shakshuka. I'm just going to tell you, I'm going to start off by saying, as the mother of 3 teenage boys, I might just be a little jealous of her Saturday or Sunday. Anyway, her weekend plans.
Yeah.
That sounded kind of wonderful to me.
See, that's interesting because if you're a conservative and you embrace family values and the proper role of women in the nuclear family, you're supposed to condemn this kind of thing.
Yes. You know, I don't disagree with what Matt Walsh said, although the second part, calling her stupid, there's no need for that. I don't think this is a stupid person.
As usual with Matt Walsh, it seems to be like, yeah, I like what he said, just not the way he said it.
Right. And honestly, I do think that it's important to point out these cultural things. Look, she's talking about how great it is to be single and not have any responsibilities and not have any errands and not have kids to take care of. And I think it is important that people push back on that a little bit because my life is very fulfilling and I do have kids. However, she talks in that video about how she gives herself a hard time. She feels bad about not being married and not having kids. She clearly has doubts. And I think she's probably a little bit sad. She probably wants kids. She probably wants a spouse. She probably wants someone to share her life. And she was trying to find a silver lining here. So I think the video, if you listen carefully, she wasn't sort of celebrating this, although she was celebrating the day a little bit. I'm not gonna. But I think that this deserved a little bit more compassion and a little bit more understanding.
I don't know, if you look at it and you look at her eyes, it actually almost, I don't want to be mean, but it sort of seems like a hostage video in the sense that everything's fine, really. I'm really happy with my life. I promise I am. And you don't really seem like she is that happy.
Yeah, when I watched it, I kind of imagined that meme where everything's on fire behind the person who's going,
this is fine.
Everything's fine. Everything's fine. But, you know, I know people and I have friends who are not married and they are getting older and they do worry about this. And I think that a lot of women do. And when I see commentary like Matt Walsh's where he calls a woman stupid, you know, it's just a shock that women tend not to be attracted to conservatism or to the Republican Party. These are some really, I think, deeply held concerns. And frankly, I think there's a lot of problems with men in this culture who don't necessarily want to settle down and get married at an age where women are able to have children. So you mentioned the word nuanced. I don't think that tweet was nuanced. Not that Twitter is the place to go for nuance,
Right.
but I think that this does really open up an important conversation about where we are socially in this country.
Listen, to bring it back to politics, because we live in Washington and everything's about politics, the single largest demographic voting for the Democratic Party, you could argue actually keeping the Democrats in power, such as it is that woman. Young,
Yes.
white, single,
Yes.
affluent women. They're the biggest group. And if we conservatives want to reach out to them and actually appeal to them, well, maybe we don't demonize. Maybe we should actually, instead of condemning someone for holding the values and principles that we disagree with, maybe we should make our values and our ideas look attractive enough for them to come our way.
Yeah, and I have also a suggestion for conservative women. Don't make parenting seem like such this incredible chore and that you're always put out. Parenting is joyful. Parenting is wonderful. Sure, there are challenges like anything, but we could do a little better. Parenting in general, parents in general could be a little bit more positive when they talk about parenting. There's this sort of like, oh, it's so hard. I mean, I'm guilty of that too.
You are.
Right? Every time every time I go to the grocery store and I'm like, where's my money going? Right?
But that's
But I
not
think
parenting. That's just surviving in Biden's economy, right?
Right. Good point. Good point. But I do think that sort of this woe is me, oh, everything's so difficult. I'm such a hero for raising kids. We need to cut that out a little bit.
Right.
It's a wonderful thing to do. We need to be more encouraging of it. We need to address men in this country who don't seem to want to make commitments to younger women and get married and start on that path for life. So again, there's a lot of work here to be done. I feel a lot of compassion for that woman. I don't think she's stupid, and I'm glad that it's kicked off this conversation.
Well, and this is a big part of what I think Independent Women's Forum, the organization you're aligned with, brings to the table, because you do have a way of communicating principles and values in a way that isn't off-putting, and I think that is incredibly important. It's funny, Matt Walsh's colleague, our colleague Ben Shapiro, my friend Ben Shapiro, he's famous for saying facts don't care about your feelings, and that is true, but we human beings do care about each other's feelings.
Well, also, I think we need to not forget that Oprah was a big part of our country for a long time, and she really created this world in which feelings matter. Now, we may not like that.
Feelings do matter, but she created a world where feelings only matter.
We're the only thing,
Yes.
exactly. We're the only thing that matters, and we need to sort of operate in that world and not sort of kick people in the face when they produce videos like this. Really examine the issue. Don't call names, that kind of stuff. I think IWF is very skilled at doing that. And so that's probably why I've been with the organization for 16 years. It's probably when I see videos like this and I see reactions like that I'm like, cringe. That's not how women don't react well to that kind of messaging.
That said, she did say something in there that I want to challenge here, where she said, you know, anytime I get down on myself for not doing what society tells me I'm supposed to do. Is society really telling her she's supposed to do that? It seems to me society's saying do exactly what she's doing, which is you don't need a woman needs a man like a fish needs a bicycle.
Yeah, this is a famous bromide, or a favorite bromide of the left, where they just say it's all a social construct. You know, girls play with dolls because, you know, society tells them that dolls are for girls and guns and swords are for boys. It's all baloney, right? And we can all pretend that society's telling you to get married. Sex and the City, famous show about, put your career first. Every single one of the women, the characters on that show, wanted meaningful relationships. And most of them wanted, except the one, but most of them wanted relationships, marriage, and the fulfillment that brings. So we're not going to escape that. Again, we can pretend that is not the goal of many people, but it is. And again, this woman really, I think, reflects a sadness out there in society, how it is very hard to find a life partner. It's very hard to find people who will share your life goals, have children, grow a family. It's really, ultimately, it's a sad story.
And if I may say, I mean, she's excited about Beyonce concerts, staying out late, drinking heavy, and watching trash television. Honestly, I don't want her having children right now. She's got a little learning to do. All right, Julie Gummer, we'll leave it there. Thanks for joining us, though. Good stuff.
Thanks for having me on.
And we love Matt Walsh. We do. It's just, once in a while, just rethink before you hit send. There's more to come on O'Connor Tonight. The American Library Association has come a long way from Marion the Librarian. Their new president, Emily Drabinski, was a featured speaker at the Socialist Conference of America. Yeah, that's right. The Socialism 2023 conference featured the top librarian in the nation, and get a load of what she had to say.
But I think your point that public education needs to be a site of socialist organizing, I think libraries really do too. And I haven't seen that for the people that are working in libraries, but I think there's real opportunity here to both connect what's happening in public education, what's happening in libraries, but also we need some help in the libraries. We need to be on the agenda of socialist organizing. So.
Socialist organizing in your public libraries. And yes, that means, as you just heard, in your school libraries, your public school libraries. Karlin Borisenko was the journalist who found that, created that undercover recording. And boy, Karlin, you had to sit for 3 days through that stuff. You should get sort of hazard pay for this. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you. Yes, I did go to the Socialism 2023 conference. I sat through 3 straight days of presentations. And, you know, I didn't get hazard pay, but I did get a really nice steak dinner for myself when it was all over.
There you go, like the capitalist that you are. By the way, what you can do instead of giving Karlin hazard pay, you can go join her Substack. It's called Actively Unwoke, and we appreciate that perspective. So tell me about Emily Drabinski. You've done quite a bit of research on her as well. We shouldn't be surprised. She brags about the fact that she's a Marxist.
Yeah, absolutely. Emily does brag about the fact that she was a Marxist librarian elected to lead the American Library Association. But what's actually really interesting about this is Emily was originally scheduled to be a speaker at the conference, but the clip I got of her was not actually of her speaking. It was in a Q&A session. Oh. So the way that the socialism conferences work is they do about half of a 90-minute session of a panel of people talking about what they want to talk about. And then anyone in the audience can get up and go up to a microphone and say whatever they want to say. And I just happened to be in the session where Emily went up to the microphone and said what she said.
And when she says, and I just want to be clear here, she specifically said that she wants libraries in public schools to be a place of socialist organizing. That's pretty unambiguous about what her intentions are.
Oh, it's completely unambiguous. And you know, I was honestly shocked that she said it, but I wasn't at the same time, because the Socialism Conference is a conference for the greatest and biggest socialist organizers in the country. They all come together. There's hundreds of them there, and they spend several days talking about socialist organizing and how they can use institutions like libraries, like public schools, to advance their Marxist ideology. And so in that context, it is completely believable that Emily would come out and say that she wants libraries to be a site of socialist organizing, even though that's something that she wouldn't say more publicly.
She also said that schools and libraries are, you know, the focus of such relentless attacks from the right wing. Well, no wonder she's specifically saying that she wants them to be a site of socialist organizing. And I mean, I know this is splitting hairs, but librarians by definition are responsible for banning books, right? They're the ones who decide which books are allowed and which aren't allowed in the libraries. And it turns out the way they've been going about their business in recent years, they're banning books that don't fit in with the left-wing agenda, with the Marxist organizing agenda.
Yeah, that's very true. But I would caution everyone to stop paying so much attention to the book bans and focusing on that, because what the socialists are doing is they're actively taking over all of the major institutions in the country, the public schools, the libraries, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The books are actually the least relevant part of what they're doing. They're having meetings, they're having discussion groups, they're having classes. I have a clip that's going to be released later today of an educator at the University of Arizona talking about how she's using the University of Arizona to teach students Marxism. Wow. And literally brought one of the students to the conference. And so the books are actually the very least of our concern right now. The institutions are what we should be focusing on.
Well, I will look forward to seeing that release as well. I mean, 3 days worth of attending the socialist conference must give you a lot of stories that you're about to grace us with.
Yeah, absolutely. There's actually going to be several stories about this idea of a smuggler pedagogy or fugitive pedagogy. This came up in several sessions about education. And what this is the Marxists are actively planning how to get around state anti-CRT laws by basically zooming in out-of-state teachers so that they can bring CRT and these other ideas into the classroom in states like Florida, where it has been specifically banned, and they're calling it fugitive pedagogy. There was an entire session about it, and I'll be releasing more information about that.
So let's just be clear. Even when parents and taxpayers get organized and they elect a new school board at the local level, or even, as you mentioned in California, elect a governor and a state legislature that actually does something about this curriculum, does something about the leftist creep that we've seen in our government-funded schools, they're going to ignore it anyway. They're just going to spit in the face of all of the voters and the taxpayers and do whatever they want.
That's exactly right. They do not care what the law is. They were actively planning to break the law throughout the entire conference, which is why I didn't feel so bad about recording them, to be honest about it. And they're very open about it. They're very brazen. They are not going to pay attention to any of these things and respect the institutions at all.
I would like to get back to Emily Drabinski, though. It's what caught our eye. And here she is, the president of the American Library Association. My understanding is that a couple of states are already entertaining withdrawing their participation in the American Library Association. It's not a mandatory thing. States don't have to send money to this group. Schools don't have to be affiliated with them. Do you think this is going to make a difference in those discussions?
Oh, I absolutely do. I actually talked with Dan Kleinman last night, who is the head of the World Library Association, which is an association that got set up to compete essentially with the American Library Association. And he thinks that this clip is going to be really valuable in inspiring more state library associations to leave. The Montana State Library Association is left. The Texas State Library Association is left. I would encourage all state library associations to cut and run, defund the ALA, because the intentions of the person leading it are very clear. And I'll tell you what, too. She had an entourage at the conference. There were people running around talking to other people on her behalf. I overheard it a couple times. And so it's not just the person at the very top. The entire institution is infected with these ideas. And so the only recourse we have is to leave and go start something new.
Whenever we talk about organizations like this, the American Library Association or the teachers unions and such, you always hear from people, parents particularly, who say, well, my kid's teacher isn't like that. My school's library isn't like that. And that may be so. But as long as these are the people who are in charge of driving the agenda, who are actually the presidents of these organizations, isn't it incumbent on all of those good teachers, good librarians to publicly disavow them? Shouldn't they be speaking out more?
Yes, I would say for the few good ones that exist, they absolutely should be. But what people need to understand is the socialists and the Marxists took over the schools of education 50 years ago. And what that means is they have now trained 2 generations of teachers in their ideology, and those teachers may not even realize what they're teaching. So although your child's teacher might be a very nice person, and I'm sure they are absolutely advancing these ideas. They just might be like sleeper agents where they don't even know what they're teaching, but they're still teaching Marxism.
Yeah, and that goes back to the teachers' institutions as well, the teachers' colleges,
Yes,
where it's a big
exactly.
part of that pedagogy.
Exactly. Yes. And I'll tell you what, too, if you want to look at the craziest stuff coming out of education, Columbia University Teachers College, this is where the Frankfurt School set up shop when they came to the United States, and they graduate some of the most far left teachers in the country. So if any of you have teachers from Columbia, keep an eye on them.
And you would know because you got your doctorate in psychology. In fact, you are Dr. Karlin Borisenko, and I appreciate you exposing this stuff. This is what we need more of. Your Substack is enlightening, to say the least. Thanks for joining us on this.
Thank you so much for having me.
And let us know about your next exclusives. We want to highlight it here for sure.
I will keep in touch.
The Substack is actively unwoke, and we like the sound of that. Karlin Borisenko, keep an eye on her. There's more to come. You're watching O'Connor Tonight. It's the Salem News Channel. We learned today the First Lady of the United States, Dr. Jill Biden. She's not that kind of doctor, but it's a big deal to them that you call her Dr. Biden. She contracted COVID-19 again. And of course, they made sure that everybody knew in the press release that she had been vaccinated and boosted, 6 times, 7 times? She's gotten a lot of booster shots. Am I the only one? Listen, this is anecdotal. Don't take medical advice from me. You take medical advice from me, you're going to die, okay? But anecdotally, the only people in my life who continue to get COVID to this day are the people who routinely get booster shots. I got the first shot because I believed, this is bipartisan. I believed Biden and Trump when they said that the vaccination was a miracle, that if you got the shot, you wouldn't get the virus and you wouldn't spread the virus. And we've learned otherwise, haven't we? And then I stopped. I got COVID, then I got natural immunity, and I've been okay, knock on wood. Anecdotally speaking, the only people I know who continue to get this virus are people who got boosted. And now they're talking about new vaccines and new boosters and mask mandates coming back again. And you just gotta laugh at this. I mean, that's the only response. So with a little warning about content, because it's kind of adult humor, Here's Rob Schneider to help us laugh.
My daughter just lost her tooth, you know, and she's 6, you know, and the tooth fairy, you know.
The tooth fairy gonna come. I lost my tooth. The tooth fairy coming, Daddy. Tooth fairy. I'm gonna put it under my pillow. A tooth fairy. Give me money.
My 10-year-old, she's over it. She's like, how long are we gonna have to put up with this? And I said, hey, come on, it's your sister. It's a beautiful thing. The idea that there's this entity, someone who does something really nice for you just because something fell out of your head, you know? It's just a nice thing to have in the universe, you know? Let's keep that going as long as we can. Because it's nice to have something to believe in. It's not true, but you believe in it for as long as you can. Until you find out it's just, you know, a lie. That's why Tony Fauci, he was like the COVID fairy. It's the COVID fairy. Remember in the beginning, listen, you don't have to wear a mask. You may make you feel better if you wear a mask, but they don't really work. May make you feel better, but, you know, they don't actually work and prevent anything, you know. But we need to save the mask for the essential workers, because the virus can tell the difference between an essential worker and a piece of shit like you people. So you don't have to wear a mask. 2 weeks later, everybody's got to wear a mask. I'm sorry, just cover your face with anything. It doesn't matter. A tennis racket, a tennis shoe, put anything over your face. Your wife's panties, your wife's ass. Put something in front of your face. Just, I don't know how you strap your wife's ass to your face, but try. Just do it, you know, do it. Anyway, but you only have to wear the mask and your wife's ass in your face until there's a vaccine. Once you're vaccinated, then you don't have to wear a mask anymore because you're protected. Because the thing about the whole theory of vaccinology is you can't give it, you can't get it, you're protected. That's what the vaccine is. So once you get the shot, then you're fine. You don't have to wear a mask anymore because you're protected. That's the whole thing about vaccination. So once you're vaccinated, you don't have to worry anymore. You can't give it, you can't get it. It's like, what? Okay, you can still get it, you can still give it. But here's the thing, though. No. But you can only, we might need to have a booster. But a booster is not another shot. You already had the shot. A booster is just a booster. If it was a shot, we'd call it a shot. It's a booster, you know. The shot's a shot. A booster's like a, you know, the shots are, you know, but you know, they'd be perfectly fine. Once you get the booster, and then you're done. You know, you get the booster, you get the one shot, and the booster, and you're fine. That's it. You're protected. 100%. You can't give it, you can't get it. What's that? Okay, there's a rumor you may need 2 shots and 2 boosters. Okay, I admit it. It's a problem. I think it's not, I admit, I don't know how it happened, but it's a rumor. It may be true. I don't know, but you might need 2 shots and 2 boosters. But again, a booster's not a shot. You know, a shot's a shot. If a booster was a shot, we'd tell you it was that. But it's not. It's a booster. It's a booster. Here comes the booster. You know, it's not. It's a shot. We tell you. Anyway, 2 boosters. But then when you have it, you're completely protected. You can't give it. You can't get it from anybody. If you're protected, you get the 2 shots, the 2 boosters. You can't give it. You get what? Okay, you can still get it, and you can still get it. Okay, that's a problem. We admit, that's a problem. It's a problem. But listen, if you got the 2 shots and the 2 boosters, and you give it to somebody, the guy's gonna go, well, at least he's got the 2 shots and the 2 boosters. You know. But if you don't get the shots, if you don't get the boosters, and then you give it to somebody, the guy's gonna go, oh, this guy, he's not buying into this bullshit. They didn't get the boosters. Fauci, the head of the CDC, Walensky, and Joe Biden, they all got 2 shots, 2 boosters, and they still got COVID. And they're like, oh, we feel very fortunate that we were boosted and vaccinated. 4 shots and you still get it? 4. If I wear 4 condoms and I still get monkeypox, I'm gonna be pissed. Who's making these condoms? By the way, if you don't want to get monkeypox, don't put a mask over your face, put it over your ass, because that's how you get it. Can we stop lying about this stuff, finally?
It really is the best medicine, and honestly, the only response to these people at this point. Mask up again. Okay. That's it for tonight. We'll be back tomorrow, same time, same place. In the meantime, we'll see you on the radio.